All right. It says we are live, and I really don't have any voice, as you all can hear. And so, rather than going through and welcoming everybody, it's just going to be a blanket welcome and welcome members and moderators. And thank you, Sam, for modding and throwing the links down. He already had the links posted before we started. And also, I have got Mitchell's Facebook, I'm sorry, not Facebook, but YouTube link in the description of our stream. And Pam and Susie, thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. And Ed's running late, he let us know, so we'll keep an eye out for him. And our speaker is Mitchell Broome. And Mitchell's from Atlanta or Atlanta suburbs, and he's quite the breeder and fish keeper. And you saw he's done a presentation before and did it in a two-part for us. And you've seen videos on Ed's channel and my channel from when we went about maybe a year ago, I don't know, to their club auction down there, and then went to his home, and it was just a fish keeper's dream. So I'm going to shut up and let him come up and talk to you guys and show us and tell us some interesting things. So welcome, Mitchell.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
So, can you show the presentation that I've also got popped up, Bob? And while you're looking at that, just want to give you guys a little bit of background. Obviously, we're all fish nerds, but I've been a major fish nerd for years now. I have been doing a lot of breeding. I think sometime late last year, I finally got the Grand Master Breeder level in our club.
Nice.
So I have done not necessarily a ton of different species, but it kind of turns out that the things I'm interested in are odd and weird and not that commonly bred. So I get a lot of breeding points for them, which is kind of cool, I guess.
Yeah, that's way
So
cool.
I have like just a ton of wide ranging variety of interests. Currently, mostly I'm doing a lot of catfish, mostly cories, um, but lots of different other weird things. And over the years, I've had a phase of angelfish and pistos and rainbows and just tons of different things. Um, so I've been really actively breeding fish for about 8 years or so now, and breeding is like the thing for me. I love the learning about the weird, interesting details about what actually is needed to breed fish, um, and then you start producing tons of them, and that's kind of my thing. That's the research and interesting things you learn about different weird odd fish. That's the thing I'm really interested in as a fish keeper. There's tons of people out there that everybody has their own different reasons for breeding, or just keeping fish. But for me, it's like that, learning interesting facts about stuff that are not that common, and then breeding them, figuring out how to do it, and then also like passing on that knowledge to other people and the fish to other people, because most of the things that I breed and I'm interested in, you don't even see in any fish stores. Like they're just not available. So that's kind of my thing. And today we're going to be talking about like just the basics of breeding. I want to hit a few like highlight points about things, give you guys some things to like think about a little bit, and then get on to maybe a question and answer sort of thing towards the end. So I got to be careful because I'll ramble about fish. Um, so getting started with breeding, like why do you want to breed? Like what is your thing? Like I said earlier, for me, it's like that learning interesting things about uncommon fish, putting that into action, and then actually passing that information on to other people. That's kind of my thing. A lot of people are in the thing for like the whole breeding for profit. That's great. That's just not my thing. Um, a lot of people are just like wanting to just like try their hand at breeding something. You've got some really cool fish. You just like to have some more of them versus having to pay for them, or you're interested in them. Whatever. There's lots of different reasons, and nobody has wrong reasons for breeding fish. Like, it's all specific to you. So the things that work for me or the reasons that I do things, they are obviously not going to be the same reasons everybody else does things. So just wanted to let you guys know. Um, Important things like breed what you like. It's don't well, okay. Maybe you do like something like complicated and hard. Like um, maybe you're into zebra plecos. Like you really want to breed zebra plecos. But there are some interest. There's some things that you need to think about if you're going to like start out with breeding zebra plecos. Like each one of them starts at like $150 each for like an inch and a half long fish, and then it may take 3 years before they get up to breeding age. So maybe don't start. Keep them, absolutely keep them if you love them. That's awesome, but don't just start with like the hard stuff. Like start out with some easy things, some quick wins to get you into breeding. See if you actually want to actually get into breeding fish. So I tend to pitch to people as things that are good entry level fish to breed, but are also really enjoyable to people is like live bearers. Like all the different kinds of live bearers are awesome. These happen to be trout goodeids, but any of the live bearers are great. Um, Bristlenose catfish. Like you don't have to get this. This happens to be a long fin green dragon, but you don't have to get the complicated or the more expensive versions of them. Just a like a common brown bristlenose is still an awesome fish to breed because everybody is going to want a bristlenose pleco.
Yeah.
Like they're easy to breed and they're really easy to distribute and they're enjoyable. They're interesting fish. Angelfish are at least somebody is always going to at least one point in your fish keeping lifetime, you're probably going to have angelfish, and you're probably going to breed them because they kind of breed on their own. But start out simple. Like get you a good win to start to get under your belt before you actually like try the more complicated things. So just keep those sorts of things in mind. Um, okay, so now you got an idea of what you want to breed. Now you got to actually figure out how to breed it. So that's when research comes in. There's lots of different information everywhere. The internet is the most obvious choice. There are a few websites that cover the real common, like not common, common is the wrong term. The widely varied sorts of things, like Seriously Fish is a really good one. It actually covers a lot of completely different kinds of fish, species that are all over the board. But there's not actually a whole lot of websites that cover everything. When you do figure out what you want to breed, that's when you can start to dive into the more specific things. Like I'm very much into corridors, all the different flavors of corridors. So I hit up all of the different corridors websites or all of the different catfish, the small catfish related websites. Um, you might be really into rainbow fish, and then you start hitting up things like the ANGFA websites and things like that. But when you have now finally figured out like what you want to breed, then you can start to focus on websites, because there's very few of them that are general information sites like Seriously Fish. Most of them are very specific to like a group of fish. Um, Another amazing content is YouTube, but unfortunately, YouTube is so there's so many content creators out there in YouTube that are doing like experimental things. They're trying things out, which that is awesome. But unfortunately, a lot of them don't actually like follow up and tell you if it actually worked or not. There's people are trying lots of different ways to actually breed some random weird little catfish, but you don't see like did it work. They they're showing you their examples, but you don't know. So I tend to prefer a lot of the content creators that actually show you like follow-up videos, or they have content that not only shows their initial testing, but that same video also shows you the things that worked for them or didn't work. So just keep in mind, YouTube can be a great resource, but like actually like pay attention. Like, did it actually work for them? Um,
Mitchell, Mitchell, sorry, someone's asking if you breed any native species.
I do rainbow shiners right now. I am starting to dip my toe into darters. Like I have actually been mapping out in North Georgia my different collection points I want to go to for different types of darters. And I have actually started to actually sample some places to figure out what would be a good population to actually pick. So darters are probably going to be one of my next things.
Nice.
But yeah, like rainbow shiners are an amazing native fish. Like
Yeah.
I bought rainbow shiners um, from a hobbyist across the country. They showed up. It was literally like 10 days or so later. I was talking to a guy in our club, and he said, "Oh, I was collecting rainbow shiners." And I said, "Where?" It's like 5 minutes from your house. It's oh,
Wow.
mm, if only I had known. So
Yeah.
yeah, and that's one of the real advantages, like local clubs. If you have a local club, you can actually talk to people about things that are working for them, like talk to them directly. Um, it's a really great resource because the local clubs also get you like the breeders award programs. So that's where you have picked a fish, you breed it, you do a write up about what actually worked for you, and you submit the write up so other people can see it, and you actually help to distribute some of those fry or young that you have bred to other people. And the same thing gets to happen to you. You get to actually talk to other breeders that have bred something, and they're giving you fish and telling you what actually worked for them. So breeders are, if you are able to actually, if you have a local club, local clubs are an amazing resource. I put up a picture for like Aquarium Co-op actually has a part of their website where they actually try to track local clubs to help hook you up with a local club if you're not aware of where one is near you. There obviously there might not be one. Like you may be in one of these like holes in the middle of the US. But if you have one available, local clubs are a great resource. Um, and again, like the breeders award programs are the things that actually get you those different levels of breeder names. So like I finally made the top level of the Grandmaster one, and that came from the points I have accumulated from breeding and submitting them to the Breeders' Award programs.
Oh, congratulations.
Yep,
Yeah, that's awesome.
thank you. Um, and then because you're researching, and if you're anything like me, you need to take notes. So I have this giant spreadsheet of all the different things I have bred, am breeding, am working on, the different details about things that worked for me, things I want to try. So the whole research thing is is where you actually take that next step of you've decided what you want to actually breed, but you need to figure out how to breed it. So research.
Um, the person that asked the question about the natives, I think that's supposed to be the black assassin, but I'm not sure. If I'm
Yeah.
mispronouncing it wrong, I'm sorry. Says I'm also thinking of trying rainbow darters. Do you have any advice?
I am just starting to dip my toe into darters. So at this point, I would say not really. Um, just getting there. So I plan to be at a point where I can start to tell people things that I think are useful things about darters, but not yet. Other than almost all darters are just amazing, and rainbow darters are one of the more amazing ones. Okay, so you have figured out what you want to breed. You've got an idea of how to breed it. So now you need the actual fish. They may be fish that you already have, which is awesome. Or you may need to acquire some fish. So when you've actually decided what you're wanting to breed, there's what you're actually the actual fish that you get or you already have really do it really does affect your chances of success. Like going back to earlier, we were talking about why you want to breed. I'll use the guppies as an example. Guppies are awesome. All guppies have really cool and interesting things about them. Um, but if you're looking for just adding some really nice guppies to your existing colony, and you just want them to breed some, that's awesome. Like you may be good with what you already have. You may actually be choosing that you want to actually like do some experimentation and you want to try and produce that next amazing guppy that where you stick on like five or six different words to describe it, like a half black double sword Dumbo ears, something something whatever, and that's your next fish. Maybe that's what your goal is. Like you want to actually see what you can produce, or maybe you're actually doing something like you actually have an already set variety. Like you've actually got a really nice strain of guppies that you want to actually maintain and you want to produce more of. You've got to pay attention to like when you've decided like why you want to breed. If it's just to produce like the next cool guppy, that's awesome. Like you can do experimentation. But if you're wanting to maintain a line, then you have to be a little bit more vigilant and do things like if they produce babies that don't actually match the traits that you're looking for, you need to separate them because you don't want them to actually breed back eventually with other ones and actually dilute the line that you're going for. But again, that all comes back to like why you're wanting to breed. Um, like it may be that you're good with them mixing up and you're just looking for some nice, healthy guppies. And that's a good thing to do. But if you need to actually pay attention and actually separate them so you can maintain your line, then what you've actually started with is important to you. Uh, Other things like, say I put on here like getting a single breeding pair is a risky kind of thing. You do things like someone sells you a pair of apistos, a breeding pair of apistos. Um, you don't actually know if you only got that one pair. You don't actually know if when they get into your tank, are they actually still going to be happy with each other? Because a lot of fish, when they actually change environments, like they're changing tanks, then they actually like, if they're paired up, then they might break their pair bond and they actually decide that they don't like each other. So other things like you buy a single pair of really nice fish and you end up losing one, and now you have one nice showfish that you have to then try and track down another one for to breed with. So just keep in mind, like, if you're getting just a single pair of fish, there are some things you need to pay attention to. Like, you might actually, if you're able to, like if you can afford it or whatever, then it's generally better to get a few pairs if you're going for pairs, or more of the same, because you can just get like shut out with one pair. Um, I tend to actually shoot for like a group of young fish. With anything that I actually breed, I like to actually start with maybe 6 or 8 or a dozen or so of young fish. Let them actually grow up. If they are a pairing kind of fish, then let them pair off. If they're a colony breeder, then almost always the more the merrier. And if you do end up losing one along the way, then it's it sucks. But at least you have others there. Uh, okay, so you figured out why you want to breed. You've decided what you want to breed. You have done some research, and now you've actually got fish, whether you've already got them or you've acquired some. Now you need to do setup. So this is where your research comes in. Um, Things like, uh, does the fish that you're shooting for breeding actually work better to breed it in like a nice, fully decorated biotope sort of setup, or does it actually work better to be in a more sterile, controlled sort of thing? There's things like one of my favorite fish. It's an amazing fish. It's the Tanganyikan killifish.
Mm.
It is awesome. It's the only killifish in Lake Tanganyika. In nature, it actually lays its eggs between the crevices and rocks. And when the eggs actually hit the water, they expand and they lock themselves into that crevice so they don't fall out and so things can't get to them. But trying to actually breed them in that way in your aquarium, you are never going to be able to get those eggs out. When the babies hatch, they are going to get eaten. You're just not going to be able to successfully simulate that kind of setup. So there's lots of other ways to do that that are not nearly as natural looking, but still successful. Like, I keep Tanganyikan killifish in a fairly bare tank, no rocks. I don't want them to actually have crevices where they can spawn in that are hard for me to get the eggs. So then I drop in a couple of spawning mops. So they will only lay in those spawning mops, and then I can take those mops out. That is not at all the way it works in nature.
Right.
but that is a successful way to do your tank setup. Um, Lots of different things to keep in mind. You might need to provide lots of different alternatives to where the fish are supposed to spawn. Things like live bearers. When you actually want live bearers to actually have success and not eat their fry, some of them are good at not eating their fry. A lot of them eat their fry. You need a place for the fry to hide. So a really common way to make that happen is to just jam the aquarium full of some kind of plant. Um, Makes it hard for you to really actually see the fry all the time, but at least they're probably going to have a good survival rate. When you're doing things like breeding plecos, they're almost all pleco. I think all plecos, not all catfish, but all plecos I think are cave spawners. All the ones I've ever interacted with are cave spawners, so you need to give them some form of a cave. Um, Things like if you're doing bettas, it depends on what kind of betta you're doing. If it is a bubble nester, then you need to actually provide it some calm, still water that you actually possibly have something floating on the surface for them to build their nest against. If you're doing the big mouth brooding bettas, a lot of times those actually want to hide under things. So give them some kinds of decorations like piles of wood or something like that so they can actually hide under them. But it all depends on like what the fish are actually requiring. You're going to have some things where you want to actually there. There's going to be some of your taste is going to come into this, no matter what. Like you still have you need to meet the requirements of the fish, but there's also like your tastes are involved too. I tend to prefer a more controlled setup versus a very natural setup. I love the look of a full biotope planted aquarium sort of thing, but I like the maintenance aspect of a little bit more bare bones kind of setup.
Mitchell, could you recommend a good beginner egg laying fish?
Uh, a good egg laying fish. Well, if you've got the space for them, angelfish are awesome. Um, they will lay on just about any vertical surface that's available. Oftentimes, it'll be something like the intake of your canister filter, or a heater, or places you don't really want them to lay. But as soon as they start laying, then you're going to end up with tons of angelfish. Other good egg layers, I really love apistos. They will lay eggs,
Yeah.
almost all of them, in little caves. So they're a great egg layer. Things like Corydoras, that's my thing. Like lots of different ways Corys solve laying of eggs, but if you want you want a good chance at success for an egg layer, Corys are a great egg layer. Uh, but yeah, like your tanks, like they can be very natural looking, but they don't have to be. They can be like very bare bones as long as you're meeting requirements for the fish. Like this is a tank of the little honeycomb woodcats. So they're a really small catfish, maybe maxing out maybe around 1.5 inches or so, maybe a little bit more. They love to actually hide in narrow spaces. They'll spawn in those, but if you actually have them spawning in like holes in wood, then you can't get the eggs out. So in this example, I have taken a whole bunch of pieces of just 1/2 inch PVC. I've plugged up the back end of it with just a piece of sponge and just stacked them up. And they will actually like hide in these pieces of PVC, spawn in the back of it. When I see them spawn in there, I take the piece of PVC out and I flush the eggs out so I can get them so that they don't eat the eggs. Because unfortunately, in nature, a lot of fish eat eggs. They will lay, and after a while, they completely forget it. There's no parental care, and they'll say, "Oh, there's a meal." Uh, Things like this is a 75 gallon of Cypochroma leptosoma. Early on, when I was first breeding them, I actually stripped the babies. The mothers will actually hold the eggs in their mouth. They'll keep them there after the fry have hatched. It's really kind of creepy when you like you'd go to actually hold the fish to see if there's anything in their mouth, because you can tell like their mouth is like distended. It's not normal looking, and you want to actually see the state of the babies in there. You hold them in the water like you use your finger or thumb to just gently pry open the mouth a little bit, and there's a whole pile of little babies looking back at you. Really weird. So early on, I would actually strip them because I had not actually had them successfully surviving on their own. And Cypochroma are unfortunately kind of known to be hard to transport. And a lot of people say, "Oh, well, Cypochroma die." Yeah, that's not a good solution. So I wanted to actually early on, I wanted to actually keep as many of them as I could. After I got a few spawns under my belt with them, I started actually letting them actually hold the babies and spit them out when they were ready. So in this case, I just piled up a whole bunch of rock in here so that initially when the babies are spit out, they have a good place where they can hide. Like this obviously is not the way this tank looks. This would look
What kind
like.
of rock is that?
It's actually limestone from coral. Like there's no reason to actually like. I am only doing this to buffer my water up, to make it harder, and give them a place to hide. So there's no reason to get the more expensive things like Texas Holy Rock or something like that, which is kind of one of the common things that people use for Tanganyikans to actually harden their water. You can also get just the cheapest dry rock you can. Take advantage of what the salt people are doing. The rocks are not just for them. Just pile them up. Tank out in my greenhouse, a really nice rainbow fish tank full of just a ton of hair algae. But that's perfect for them. The fry are surviving in there on their own. Like in my greenhouse, I have rainbow fish that I don't even have to pull eggs from. These are Arachnocentris ornatus, but like that's probably one of the more close to natural tanks I have. Might not be exactly what everybody thinks is an awesome looking tank, but it sure is effective. Live bearers, I would love to be able to produce enough guppy grass or something like that to hide them so they could actually survive, but I can't produce that much because I have lots of things going on. So fake Christmas garland. And this is an experiment. I've got a few of these. These are the spawning mops from koi. So it's like a 3 or 4 foot long spawning mop. Not a great color. Oh boy, I wish it wasn't that color. But it sure is cheap and easy and effective. So yeah, like it's about a combination of what the fish require and what you actually are okay with. A lot of people are going to shoot for a, a nice planted tank or something like that, and that's awesome. That's your thing. In my case, I go for kind of a controlled setup, so my tanks tend to look like this. Okay, you you've got your fish, you've got a tank for them set up for them. How do they spawn? Um, a lot of things like live bearers. Just add water, water and food, and you're good. And a little bit of time. Um, bristlenose, bristlenose plecos, kind of the same thing. Just when they finally get old enough and ready, they're going to spawn. It really helps to give them a cave, but you don't have to give them a cave. I didn't really know this, but they will spawn anywhere. I was removing caves to have some hold for an auction that was coming up. I didn't want them to spawn. Had a pair spawn under a sponge filter, just in the open, under a sponge filter. Whole cluster of eggs there. So they made a way. Uh, on the other extreme, there are some fish that are in the hobby that have never been bred by anyone in captivity. There are no reports on them. They just have not happened. The ones that everywhere you see them, they're all wild caught. So that goes back to your research thing of like, um, I have a few Corridoras that I have. I love them. They're awesome. But I'm not expecting to really get them to breed. I would love it, but nobody else has bred them, so it'd be nice. But I'm not holding out hope on them. And then there's wide ranges everywhere in between. Um, sometimes it takes cool water changes, like storms are your friend. Storms simulate they storms lower the air pressure, and they help to trigger a lot of fish to think that a rainy season is coming on. And in rainy seasons, there is generally a lot of influx of water and food into ecosystems. So when the rains come, they decrease the water temperature and the air pressure that comes along with storms lowers. So fish think it's a rainy season. And you can simulate that by you want to try and get your fish to spawn. Now, not all fish are like this. It depends on the species, but like do a cooler water change when you know a storm is coming. Do a few of them in like a few days leading up to a storm coming up. That is one of the most common ways to trigger quite a few different species of Corridoras. And then there's just all kinds of range between them. Again, it goes back to your research. So just think about like what you have chosen to actually breed and decide, make decisions based on your research of what you're breeding. Okay, so now you've actually got them to breed. Got to figure out where to put them somewhere. how to actually raise them. Are they super easy like live bears? You just need to actually give them cover and they will probably survive. Are they like some killifish where you really actually have to do some work to actually get their eggs to hatch? Some of them you might actually have to take the eggs out, store them in like damp peat moss, or there's a few different varieties of ways to do that for like months until they have finally actually um, gotten to the point where they're ready to hatch. Because in nature, some killifish are live in places where the puddle that they live in dries up, and it's a yearly thing. So they lay their eggs in the mud, and it'll dry out. The parents will die. The puddle will dry up. But when the rains come back and the puddle fills back up, the eggs get wet again, they hatch, and you have a billion little killifish. Some of them do have very specific requirements that you need to simulate that. Things to think about. Uh, if you're if you're getting like a goodied, a lot of goodieds, they're live bearers. Their babies pop out like big, like like enough that you can actually that they will easily eat the same food the parents do. Um, they won't produce a lot of them, but they will actually produce big, really well developed fry. Um, there's a lot of things like there are some rainbow fish that have babies that are so small when they hatch, like a threadfin rainbow fish, that when it hatches, it is going to be a few weeks before it is big enough to eat baby brine, live baby brine. So you've got to figure out how to feed them. A lot of those cases, you get into some of the things that have those sorts of requirements, and you start maintaining weird live food cultures like you're growing parameciums, and I tend to do green water. So like a lot of what people want to get rid of anytime they have green water show up in their tank, it's an algae bloom kind of thing. That is really good for really tiny fry
Mhm.
because it is a constant food source all the time for them to get them up to a size where they can start to take something larger. But again, it goes back to the research thing. You need to actually have an idea of how you actually need to deal with those young when they do actually, when you have become successful and actually had them spawn, and you now need to actually get the eggs to either hatch or you need to actually maintain the fry. Uh, so biggest thing, you may have seen it through on every slide I have. Don't stress out. Like don't stress out. Like it might not work out for you a few times, but it'll be okay. You you finally say you finally got your first spawn of something that you've been working on. That might not work out, but that's okay because you're going to have more chances. Once you actually finally do get fish to actually spawn, it is way more easy to get them to spawn the second time. A lot of times, the first spawn is the hardest thing to make happen. A lot of times, it's just driven by like age. We're all not super patient people, I'm sure. We get new fish in, and you're like, those are probably ready to spawn right now. But it kind of depends on the fish. I have corridoras, or corries are my thing, or currently my thing. My thing moves around, but the past 4 years or so, Corys have been my thing. So Corys have this kind of annoying thing about them of when they're young, they can actually have growth spurts. So it's really hard to tell unless you actually got the fish from someone that knows when they were actually hatched. It's hard to tell their age based on their size until they become full grown adults. So you get a fish that you think might actually be ready to spawn. It might still need 6 months or more. You get into some of the fancy uh, I would guess I call them like the designer plecos, the really nice, beautiful plecos. Some of those they'll take like 3 years to reach maturity, so they're an investment of time. So that kind of goes back to one of my earlier points of, yeah, like you love zebra plecos. They're amazing because they are. It might take 3 years or so for them to be ready to spawn. So while you're maintaining your zebra plecos and letting them actually grow out, try something else while you're waiting on that to happen. But at the end of the day, like patience is a big thing about this. Some of them you just can't rush. Things like I have some Corys that are seasonal breeders. Like there's some times during the year that there's no way I can make them breed, and other times that that's their window of breeding time. But things like we were talking about earlier, I do rainbow shiners. Rainbow shiners are a native species. They're down into North Georgia. They have a pretty wide range, but they're natives. So they actually, in nature, are expecting cooler temperatures for a period of the year. When it becomes really hot during the summer and really cold during the winter, rainbow shiners in nature don't spawn. But if you're keeping them in an aquarium, then you can actually control that temperature and you can kind of fake them out and cheat around the fact that they are actually seasonal spawners. And if you actually maintain their temperature in a range that they actually are good with spawning during, then they'll be great. And you can actually, like, I can actually have, if I really had that much room, I could actually pull spawns from my rainbow shiners every 2 or 3 weeks for basically the year. But I don't have that kind of space.
Well, that segues right into Mickham's question. Can you see the chat?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, he's asking specifically about how many tanks you're running and how many for what species. And
so I have between my basement and my greenhouse, I have about 150 tanks. Now, because of the things that I like to breed, I shoot for smaller, more peaceful fish. So about 100 of those tanks are 20 longs, because that is my favorite tank ever. Well, I would that shape of them. I'm good with them being like larger but low. Like a 40 long is also a great tank size, because of the kinds of things I'm interested in. So I have about 150 or so tanks. Um, right now, I have around 55 species of Corys of some form. I've bred about maybe 65% of those. Some of them, as the weather cools down and I can actually able to actually have my water out of my tap not be like 82 degrees, when it's actually cool enough that I can actually do cold water changes. So we're coming up into that time of the year, then I'll pick out about like 10 species and I'll do like a big live blackworm order and for like and shoot for around when storms are planned, and I will try and force about 10 rare species to breed. So that's kind of what happens with me when the water cools off out of the tap. I'll do that probably maybe 2 or 3 times a year. And then when it becomes hot and the water goes back up super warm, uh, I have some things that will breed through that. That's no problems. But those rare ones that I'm really trying to actually trigger that haven't triggered yet for me, that's what I do. Um, I also have maybe 5 or 6 different species of like Tanganyikans of some form, a few different shell dwellers. I have uh, a few different apistos left. I've got some different kinds of wild bettas, few different rainbow fish now. Um, Lots of the random stuff that I have really been interested in over the years. The ones that I really, really enjoyed, I have kept those, and the ones that are cool and all, but not necessarily the ones that I'm actually like shooting for like keeping. Those I've passed on to other people so I could have more room for my current passion. And when I do decide to switch off of Corey's, if I ever do, like my collection will decrease, and then I'll balloon up on something that becomes my next interest, which might turn into darters. And I think once I get darters kind of handled, I'm going to shoot for some of the oddball gobies. Like, I do really want to actually do some of the gobies that require the the brackish water phase.
Oh.
So that's probably like maybe a few years off for me, but I think that's going to be my next one after darters. But yeah,
And
I move around.
we're down to about 6 or 7 minutes if we end on time.
Yep. So this was my last slide. So I'm questions.
Awesome. You're right on time. I don't see any out there.
They have been asking questions throughout the whole thing. I wish I was writing them down.
Well, the ones that I've seen, I've asked him. Let me scan back and see if I see any I didn't get.
So I know for myself,
If anybody's asked a question that you haven't heard answered yet, just repeat it now.
That's a good idea.
so I've bred some fish. I should say fish have bred in my company. I didn't breed anything because it was angelfish 6 years ago. I loved it. It was a great start. I can't get these angels to breed, and I want them to breed. I've had axolotls breed, not by choice, but because they bred. But I guess it, and I like how you described in the beginning, because not everybody is in the fish keeping hobby for the same reasons.
Exactly.
Some just like, oh, look at the pretty colors.
Yeah.
Others like, where did they come from? How were they captured? Like, it's amazing. The more you learn, the more you realize there's so much more to it. It's like
Yeah.
pretty cool hobby.
Absolutely. And everybody comes at it with a different perspective. So it's that's part of the interesting thing about this hobby. Like, a lot of people can like land on the same thing, but they came to it for different reasons.
Yep.
So that's awesome.
As far back as I can go, I only see 3, and I remember answering or asking 4 questions.
Mick M is asking, how long did it take to build your tank systems up till now? 2, 3 years?
Well, so I'm
Good
one
question.
of the people that like try and eventually get to, well, I try to get to a more efficient, more productive sort of thing, which means that over the course of years, things change. Because, oh, I have decided that I could actually do this section of the room better. So where I am now is effectively it's the entire time. It's not. It's I've been reading in the house I'm currently in for 7 or so years now. So it's never going to be done. So
Right.
I would say 7 or so years. I started out small and then it grew and then it grew. And then I got the basement filled out. And then I decided, well, I could make that section of the room more efficient. So let me redo it. And I could do this one better and let me redo it. So if you look at my fish room over time, things are at different finished states. It's not all completely consistent because I'm an experimenter. I try things all the time. Try to get a more useful way of doing things, and that turns into I'm never finished.
Wow. Yeah.
I know when Ed and Ginger walked through it, I couldn't believe, turned the corner and another room full of tanks, rows of tanks, and then the greenhouse. I was like, oh my God.
Yep.
What state are you in, Mitchell?
I'm in Georgia. I'm a little bit north of Atlanta, which is kind of nice. I'm not. We joke of I have a wet heat. Like everybody talks about the dry heat in like Arizona and all. Like try a wet heat. That's
Yeah.
but North Georgia with my greenhouse, which is just a passive thing. It's not like actively heated or cooled really. But I'm able to overwinter some species in my greenhouse. So I have
Wow.
some rainbows like Radnocentris ornatus. They can actually handle a crazy wide range of temperatures. Natives like rainbow shiners can too. I have a couple of different kinds of killifish from around the Turkey area. So a few different Aphanius species that I have out there all year long. And in North Georgia, it gets cold, but in my greenhouse, it never really gets below about the low 40s or so. So I've chosen fish for in my greenhouse to overwinter that actually can handle that kind of temperature.
Okay. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, the lizards like it in there, the native little lizards.
Oh yeah, I've got tons of them. They're my non-aquatic cleanup crew. So now I have a camera on the outside of the greenhouse that shoots out across the backyard, and periodically I have lizards walk across my camera. It's
That's
kind of
pretty cool.
hilarious.
That's pretty
There's a
cool.
dinosaur coming across my camera.
I'm familiar with that hot water having to do water changes, and sometimes it does, or the warm water coming out like 80 or 82. I don't know how it can do that. Even I'm above Chattanooga, but I have to be careful of that because
Yeah.
even just the cold water, it comes out hot. You got to be careful.
Yeah, like it actually comes out hotter than the water I keep in my tanks.
Wow.
Yeah. All right.
That's crazy.
Anything else? Any other comments or questions? Or I'm going to mention that, and I don't know if he's presenting or if he's just attending, but Mitchell's going to be at our East Tennessee aquatic. I don't remember the proper name of it. In Knoxville, the fish swap this weekend, and that's on Saturday or Sunday.
Saturday.
Saturday.
Yeah,
So,
I'll have a table there.
Yep.
Lots of weird, rare stuff. Because that's my thing.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much, Mitchell, and
Great.
definitely looking forward to having you back the next time. And I will get you some leaves in the mail, some magnolia leaves. I promised last time, and I forgot it. So thanks everybody. Thanks everybody in the chat. Good questions, and thanks for participating. And thank you, Huawei, for doing an awesome job with the links. Appreciate you. Good night, everybody.
All right,
Thanks, guys.
guys.